So good evening, everyone, and welcome to the first COVID-19 Recovery Task Force meeting. My name is Rosalind Huey. I am with the City Manager's Office serving as Deputy City Manager, and I am one of the team members who are assigned to assist the task force in the recovery work. And you're going to be hearing from many of our staff members and really from all of you this evening. So before we get started, we want to walk through some of the logistics for our interpretation. So we do have interpretation available in both Spanish and Vietnamese. And I'm now going to turn it over to my team member, Carlos Velasquez, to walk us through those instructions. Carlos.
Rosalind, this is Sparky Harlan from Bill Wilson Center.
Yes.
You put me in as co-host by mistake. Kiana Simmons is the rep for Bill Wilson Center. I'm not. So can you switch us so she can get into the meeting?
Absolutely. We will get Kiana in as a co-host. Thank you so much for letting us know.
Okay. Thanks. Sorry to interrupt you.
No problem. Thank you. Is there anyone else, any other task force members having issues with being renamed as a co-host? We want to make sure we have all of our primary representatives in. Christine?
So I do have a general question. I'm with the Silicon Valley Independent Living Center. I'm wondering if ASL interpretation was offered, and if so, is it being provided tonight for those that need it?
Carlos, if you want to take yourself off mute, yeah.
Yeah, saludos everyone. This is Carlos Velasquez. Just some brief housekeeping notes. This meeting will include interpretation in Spanish and Vietnamese. So thanks to our interpreters for today, Armando, Vincent, Tiffany, and Priscilla. To access the interpretation, click on the interpretation button on your Zoom screen and then select the appropriate language. We have two videos, one in Spanish and another in Vietnamese, that will play right now and explain this process.
Hola y bienvenidos a esta reunión. Para acceder a la función de interpretación, haga clic en el icono del globo en la parte inferior de la ventana de Zoom y selecciona el idioma que desea.
Xin chào và cảm ơn quý vị đã tham dự buổi họp ngày hôm nay. Để truy cập vào phần thông dịch của ứng dụng Zoom, xin nhấn vào biểu tượng hình quả địa cầu ở phía dưới của màn hình.
Thank you, Aurelia. Other housekeeping notes, task force members, we ask all of you to rename yourselves on Zoom by first and last name, and also add your organization name so we can ensure you are identified as a task force member. It's very easy. All you have to do is hover over your image on your Zoom profile, see those little three dots, click on that and rename yourself to your first, last name, and organization name. Also, this meeting is open to the public. Saludos to all of you. Thank you so much for being here. You'll be able to see and hear tonight's meeting, and you will have the opportunity for 2 minutes time to share your voice and comments in your preferred language during the public comment portion of the meeting. This will happen towards the end of the agenda. Until then, we appreciate your patience and respect during the rest of the meeting. For task force members,
estoy escuchando el meeting en mi phone.
For task force members, there will be time after each section of the agenda for questions. And we ask task force members that if you do have a question during that time, to use the raise your hand feature down below on your Zoom screen. My colleague Mike will be the one announcing your name so you can unmute yourself. And also, if just make sure to mute yourself during this time. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Carlos. So again, good evening, everyone. We're so glad to have you with us, and thank you for your patience as we're getting everybody in to the Zoom call, and welcome to members of the public. Again, my name is Rosalind Huey. I'm with the City Manager's Office. I'm serving as Deputy City Manager. I'm a little bit new to the role. I've been in this role for about 6 months now, and I previously served as Director of the Department of Planning, Building, and Code Enforcement. And I've been with the city almost 7 years now, and just delighted to be a part of the great work that we're doing here in our community. I am an urban planner by training, so I love city building work, and I love working with people in cities. So delighted to have the opportunity to work with all of you throughout this process. Before we do get into the agenda, I would like to start out tonight's meeting acknowledging that we are on the ancestral lands of the Ohlone people, and we pay respect to their elders, past and present, and we give thanks to their sacrifice and examples of humility, stewardship, and resilience. So now I want to take a moment to introduce members of the City Manager's recovery team. And I'm going to ask each of them just to briefly introduce yourself. Many of you have spoken with them already. We have Aurelia Bailey, Carlos, who you've heard from previously, and Katarina. So Aurelia, we can start with you.
Sure. Thank you, Rosalind. Good evening, everyone. Like Rosalind said, my name is Aurelia Bailey, and I am looking forward on this journey with all of you for the next year. Just a snippet about myself. I was born in the Philippines, and my family immigrated to the United States in the early 80s. My story is very common to many immigrant families in San Jose. We lived in East San Jose in a 4-bedroom house with 2 other families totaling 11 people. Both of my parents worked 2 jobs for several years to ensure their 5 children would have the basic needs. So early on, I found my passion working with families underrepresented. I became heavily involved working in nonprofit agency in the Mayfair and Santee neighborhood. Once I joined the city several years ago, I had the opportunity to work in various departments to improve the quality of life for our residents. I've already worked with several of you that's part of this task force, from the place-based initiative in the housing department, the flood that took place in 2017, and most recently our COVID-19 food and distribution necessities and our vaccination task force. Again, I am looking forward working with all of you, especially embarking on this very important work, because I know you're all committed to this journey. I am going to pass it on. Thank you. I'm going to pass it on to Carlos.
Saludos, everyone. Again, my name is Carlos Velasquez, and I'll be one of your primary contacts for the COVID-19 Recovery Task Force. I'm honored to be on this year-long journey with you because this work is very personal to me. I was born and raised here in San Jose to immigrant parents, one a tailor with his own shop, another a housewife who also became a small business owner. Spanish was a dominant language in our home. I remember how much we struggled growing up and how it continues to be tough for our family today, our cousins, tios, and loved ones. And I know that if this pandemic had happened when I was a young kid, our family would have been devastated. I will carry my familia's experiences into this work, as I know you will, whether it's your own or those of the people that you work with, to make sure that our experiences, our struggles, dreams, and desires are included when it comes to recovery. Our familias deserve this respect. Gracias to all of you here, and I look forward to working with you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Katarina Tubera. I'm also a point of contact for the new Community and Economic Recovery team. In short, I'm also a proud Filipino American who grew up in San Jose, California, and I want to see San Jose recover safely, and I'm so happy to meet all of you this evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you sharing some of your story and your connection to community here in San Jose. So we've got a great team to assist this task force. And I have to acknowledge that there are many city staff across multiple departments who have been involved in our response and now recovery to COVID-19. We have many of them here this evening who are going to be serving as facilitators and scribes during the breakout groups. And I also want to acknowledge two other team members, Mike Jones from the city managers team, who is behind the scenes making all of this happen, as well as Jennifer Providor. She is a team member in the Department of Planning, Building, and Code Enforcement, and we just appreciate her volunteering her time as well. We can go to the next slide. Next slide, please. Great. So obviously now I really want to take the opportunity to acknowledge and really thank all of the task force members. This slide here and then the next slide, there's so many of you, we couldn't fit you all on one slide. You're all represented here, 55 member organizations. And we know that you have long partnered with the city in so many different capacities. And obviously, you've helped us through this pandemic during the last 19 months. And really, the city has relied on you, and we continue to rely on you to do so many things. You've been delivering meals, and you've been helping to house our most vulnerable residents. You've been assisting with healthcare. You've been providing COVID-19 testing and vaccinations. You've been providing childcare and getting people connected to childcare, to senior care. You've been helping to train workers and get them reemployed. You've been doing so much more. So we understand that many of you, I'm sure, have been stretched very thin. And so we're just really grateful that once again, when we call on you to help, that you've said yes, and that you've decided to participate in this recovery task force. So we just appreciate your service and for volunteering your time, and really just thank you for your commitment. So next slide. So finally, we're going to get to a quick review of the agenda tonight. We'll have quite a bit to cover in our first meeting. So first, we're going to start off with providing some context, talking about the background of this task force and the purpose. We'll then do a breakout group exercise, and we're really hoping this will be the opportunity for you all to speak, to get to know each other, talk about some of your initial ideas around recovery and engaging our community. And then we'll have a segment where we'll just talk about how we're going to decide to work together. So we have a presentation on the Brown Act and the Public Records Act. We'll be talking about our procedures, talk about some group agreements, and hoping to get some consensus around those. At the end, we'll have opportunity for public comment. So currently we're expecting that each member of the public who would like to speak, we'll give them about 2 minutes to do that. And then we'll wrap up with the next steps. I do want to make sure to let the task force members know that as we go through each segment of the agenda, there will be opportunities for questions and discussion. Okay, so next slide. Okay, let's move right into the next slide to talk about, so how did we get here tonight? How did you all get here tonight? Well, actually, it was back in February and March of this year. The City Council developed a common understanding of the city roadmap as a framework for prioritization of really big change initiatives happening in the city. And these initiatives are really beyond our normal delivery of core services in each of our departments. And really, these initiatives and items are big challenges that really require cross-departmental coordination and focus, as well as working with other governmental agencies and partnering with our nonprofit organizations to really make a difference. The approach has been the creation of 8 enterprise priorities, and these are shown in the left column on the slide. They're in gray. And each enterprise priorities has different initiatives that are shown in the purple boxes. So there are actually a total of 41 different initiatives across the 8 enterprise priorities. And I'm hoping you'll be able to see in that top row, the first row, that enterprise priority is COVID-19 community and economic recovery. And then if you'll go across that row to the very end, you'll see the little purple box with the red circle around it that indicates Build Back Better, the Recovery Task Force. So this is the task force initiative of the Recovery Enterprise Priority. And so we really believe, the city believes that this roadmap will help us clarify our priorities, help us design a transparent arena for input and for deliberation, that it would help us align with the budget process as a strategic planning mechanism, and that it'll help us integrate an equity-based approach to our decision-making. Next slide. So as I just mentioned, there are 41 different initiatives, and then 18 of those 41 are actually recovery related. So now these are shown in the pink boxes. So these are the 8 initiatives that are related to recovery. And you'll actually see on this slide that some of these recovery initiatives actually fall outside of the recovery initiative, and they actually land in other enterprise priorities. So this, again, it means that departments will be working together and coordinating quite a bit in terms of the road ahead. For the recovery initiatives, we are looking to the task force, to you all, to advise the city teams and to monitor our progress. As projects and plans or programs are implemented, we will be looking to you to help us understand what's really working well and perhaps what's not working well, identify any gaps that may exist. And in the coming months, we propose that the city staff who are leading these recovery initiatives will provide presentations to the task force. And this would include status reports. They'll talk about the funding allocations and data and information on people and businesses that we are serving. Next slide. So we understand that how we do this work ahead of us is as important as what we do. So I'm just going to head and read the statement on the slide. So we understand that recovery is not for us to do alone, that we have to work together. It's done with the whole community and really for the benefit of those who have been burdened most by the crisis. And that we need to be guided by their wisdom, tapping into their potential and building on their deep, enduring strength. I also just want to highlight that back in on May 4th, there was a City Council study session about our approach to recovery, and staff shared the how of our work is grounded in principles of people, equity, dignity, empathy, and action. And so we've decided as we move forward that we are going to lead with people and we're going to lead with equity, that we're going to honor the experiences of others, and that we are learning to value everyone in our community, and that really we see each other as neighbors. We're helping one another. And along with that, one of the great things about the City of San Jose and our community is our wonderful diversity throughout our community, while yet realizing that there are a lot of commonalities. And we admit that we have limitations sometimes, but we decide to take advantage of opportunities to learn from one another and to grow. And then lastly, we are committed to extending empathy. And certainly the importance of empathy has taught us a lot throughout this pandemic. Next slide. So we are really building upon a lot of existing work. Many of you all, for the last year and a half or so, have been involved in response and in recovery. So there are other efforts underway or completed. For example, the Silicon Valley Recovery Roundtable, and a report was produced from that effort. The Greater Downtown San Jose Economic Recovery Task Force that was led by Councilmember Raul Perales. The Health and Racial Equity Task Force that is currently underway and meeting. And then also the Race Equity Action Leadership Coalition, or REAL. And so we're building upon these existing efforts. We're learning from these efforts. We're incorporating principles of these efforts. And I do want to take the time to note, as it relates to REAL, the REAL Coalition and their principles for our investment agenda. You know, they've indicated that we should understand that the federal rescue funding is the people's money, and that local government should not seek to go back to the way things were, but we should really work toward building a more equitable future for our entire community. And that the scale of the federal resources should be viewed really as an opportunity to really make breakthrough achievements in areas such as alleviating racial, ethnic, economic, and other disparities that has really produced so much harm and even death and suffering in many of our communities during the pandemic. Next slide. So just want to share a little bit about the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARP. I'm sure many of you are really familiar with this. So for the City of San Jose, this has been the largest and most flexible recovery funding source for us. We have received $212.3 million in direct local recovery assistance to our community. And our adopted budget for fiscal year 21-22 has allocated over $133 million of these funds to resolve budgetary shortfalls and to also support the COVID-19 recovery initiatives. Next slide. Now, I know this chart is hard to see, and I apologize, but this provides an overview of the city's budget action back in June of this year. So that first row, it indicates revenue from the federal government. That's the $212.3 million that I just referenced in ARP funding. And I want to draw your attention to the line that's highlighted in the red rectangle, the $83.4 million in ARP funding. This is the amount that was approved and allocated for the 18 recovery initiatives that I just previously spoke about in the city's roadmap. Now, many of you are probably aware that the City Council was actually scheduled on Tuesday to take action on the $82.5 million in remaining available ARP funds. However, due to uncertainty in the state's treatment of tax revenues the city receives, the council actually voted on Tuesday to defer its consideration of a large portion of the unallocated American Rescue Act funding until there is resolution with the state on the treatment of tax revenues and related fiscal issues. So the administration was instead directed to go back to council with recommendations for essential expenditures for critical programs and services. And so the administration, we intend to return to council in response to their direction at the end of this month or early next month. But again, I do want to remind you that the allocation of the $83.4 million in ARP funding has already been approved in the city's fiscal year 21-22 budget. And those dollars have been allocated to the 18 recovery initiatives. Next slide. So I won't spend a lot of time on this, but I did just want to share the breakdown of that $83.4 million that has already been approved and allocated to the 18 initiatives. This is how the money is being allocated. So you see the categories. The biggest category is resident relief. And so what does that mean? That includes housing stabilization, reemployment, and workforce development. And of course, food and necessities distribution. So that's really the biggest allocation. Next is small business and nonprofits and the arts. I believe next is encampment services and the Beautify SJ program. We have funding allocated for childcare and education, about $5.6 million. Emergency housing with an allocation of $5.5 million. And really, this is important funding for our emergency housing construction and operations to make sure that our unsheltered and those very vulnerable get sheltered during this time. The Recovery Foundation portion is comprised of federal and state stimulus, continuity of city services, making sure that our workplace is safe, a focus on employee health, and the city's efforts to drive to digital. And then that other category, about $1.1 million. Those are really for work streams that support our internal operations and staffing efforts, as well as some miscellaneous policy work. Next slide. So as we begin to think about our future and as we think about recovery, our focus really has to be on what is in the best interest of our community. So we are looking to stabilize and strengthen our families. And this really includes, so many different things to support our families. It's physical and mental well-being. It's making sure that people are housed well. It's about reemployment and supporting our workers. It's about childcare and senior care and education and digital equity. So really, these are all of the different elements that we see that are required to support our families and really to lift up our households. And then, of course, we are also very much focused on supporting our small businesses. We have many businesses located in neighborhood business districts that were hit really hard by the pandemic. So we are really looking to focus to support them and help them grow and pivot moving forward. Next slide. So we expect that there are likely specific topics or areas of interest that the task force may be particularly interested in and might want to dive deeper in that work. And we are suggesting perhaps that work could be done in committees or solution groups. And these are just some ideas, some topics. And obviously, we're going to be looking to the task force members for your ideas, getting an idea of what you want to delve into. And as I mentioned earlier, we will want to leverage existing efforts. So for example, we might want to consider recommendations from the Silicon Valley Recovery Roundtable or the Downtown Task Force and the Health and Racial Equity Task Force. And then also we think that the task force might want to consider having guest speakers come in, share information from these groups, and really many of you all, your organizations may have information and ideas to share with the task force. So we think that guest speakers and presentations would be very helpful, and we think that we might see some synergies there. Next slide. So getting to the role and the responsibilities of the task force members, and we know that this is important to you all, of course, in terms of what the expectations are. And so first, and as I mentioned earlier, we are really looking to you to guide the city, advise us on the 18 roadmap recovery initiatives, monitor our progress, letting us know where the gaps are, making sure that we're reaching the residents and our businesses in need, and helping us to consider opportunities to leverage other efforts. Next, we'll need the task force members to share this information, right? To get the word out in neighborhoods among your constituents. And really, these 18 recovery initiatives, it's about connecting the services and the resources to our residents. So we're going to be looking to you. We know that you are trusted organizations and individuals in our neighborhood. So we're going to be looking to you to help get the information out and connect to our residents. We think a big part of the task force responsibility will be around creating a community engagement and communities and communication strategy. And so we've shared in various presentations to our city council that we understand that and acknowledge that this journey that we're on to recovery involves healing and resilience, and it's going to require a lot of unprecedented effort and resources and really creativity from us all. And we come in this being very sensitive and understanding that many of our residents have experienced significant trauma, and that we really do need to spend time just to listen, right? To actively listen to people's experiences, and that we'll need to lift up voices that aren't always heard. So we'll need to use a variety of engagement tools in this work. We know that Zoom calls like this won't work, right, all the time in reaching every member in our community that we want to reach. And so we want to meet people where they are. And that's why we're so glad that the task force members represent the trusted organizations currently in our neighborhoods. And so we know that we're going to have to try a lot of new tools. We're thinking about things like artistic expression, storytelling, and gamification techniques. We also want to pilot the promotores model to reach those residents where traditional outreach strategies really just don't work. So we see promotores as uniquely qualified to address the needs of many of our underserved neighborhoods because they reach community members literally where they are, right? And they speak the same language, they share common culture, and they connect. And so we are hoping to pilot this and actually have individuals being able to connect with people where they are. So in their homes, in markets, at restaurants, at ball fields, at workplaces, and also at places of worship. So we're really excited about this opportunity. And then lastly, in the upcoming months, as the task force receives updates on the recovery initiatives, and as you and we engage our residents, you may decide that there are new recommendations that you will want to send to the City Council for their consideration. Next slide. I think I am done. So thank you for listening to me. I know that was a lot of information to take in. And at this time, we will open it up for questions. And I think Mike is going to help. So yes, if you could raise your hand, and I think our team member, Mike Jones, is going to call on you.
Yes, we have Maria.
Hi, Maria.
Hey everyone, good evening. I'm Maria Noel Fernandez with Working Partnerships USA. And first just wanted to appreciate you, Rosalind, and your entire team for being so thoughtful and for kind of, getting us to this evening. My reflection and what I wanted to lift up here is that, I really appreciated the principle that you laid out of being guided by the wisdom of those burdened by the crisis the most. And kind of with that same principle, one of the areas that I and I think many others want to lift up is around the lack of focus or explicit focus on workers. And I think it's an opportunity to actually say, yes, it's about community. Yes, it's about businesses that have suffered so much. And we cannot not be explicit about the impact on workers who have carried us through the pandemic as transit workers, grocery workers, healthcare workers, and so many other workers. And so that's one element that, as we look at the focus areas, I think is incredibly important for this body to identify as a focus area and not merely a constituency, but a focus area. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Maria. We couldn't agree with you more. And I'm sure many of our task force members would be in agreement as well. And I would encourage you all, as we do break out into our small groups, to have discussions around that. And obviously, again, we couldn't agree with you more in terms of the focus on workers, supporting them, connecting them if there are reemployment opportunities that are needed. Absolutely. Thank you so much.
All right, next we have Christine Fitzgerald from Silicon Valley Independent Living Center.
Hello. I couldn't agree more with what Maria has just said. We also need to recognize and take in the idea that disability covers all people of this county, gender, race, ethnicity, economic strata. Disability does not pick and choose. It crosses everything. And certainly with COVID, we're looking at an even bigger picture because so many big people have been affected even more than they had been before. I'd like to raise up two things to everybody's mind and heart, and that is to take in the equity pledge that the county has signed and that the city has signed to make sure that all venues such as this are fully accessible. And when I mentioned ASL, I think it was lost that I was speaking about American Sign Language, and I do want to lift that up. I also want to make sure that what we do acknowledges and recognizes everybody in our community. And even if you don't think you have somebody in your life that has a disability, you probably do. The person may or may not acknowledge it. But if you acknowledge it for them, you're helping them and so many others. And we will do everything we can together to make this county even better for everybody as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christine. And as you were speaking, I was thinking that perhaps this would be a topic or interest area that the task force could actually form a committee and bring in other voices as well to that conversation.
I think that would be advisable, yes.
All right, next is Araceli Sierra from Somos Mayfair.
Sierra de Somos Mayfair.
Oh, ¿ya me escuchan? Ah, gracias.
Can you hear me? Thank you.
Disculpen que me retrase un poquito
So sorry if
a
I'm a little bit
roles de
late.
nuevo. Lo que pasa es que tuve problemas con mi
I had a
internet y
little problem with
no me
my
aparecía
internet,
cómo
and
levantar la
so
mano.
I
Estoy por
was
mi
having a hard time
teléfono.
raising my hand.
Tenía una
I have
sugerencia y
I
quizá
have a
también
suggestion
pregunta en la
and
parte
also
de
a
roles.
question
No
about my role.
escuché el
I
rol
didn't
de los
hear the role
suplentes
about the
y siento que son súper
substitutes, and
importantes
I think those are very
porque
important
pues van a estar
because
representando en caso
they
de que uno de
represent,
nosotros no
in case
esté.
one of us is
Me
not
gustaría que
available, I
tuviera
would like to.
Sí, ya no te podemos oír, Araceli.
más eficaz y
More
nos va a ayudar
efficient.
a avanzar este
It will
trabajo
help
que
us
estamos
move
haciendo.
forward this work that
Y
we're
creo
doing.
que
And I think
en lo que a mí respecta,
in what
la
regards to me,
persona
in my
Tilsa González
personal,
que va a ser mi suplente,
I would like to
confío
know who is
mucho en
going to be my
ella
sub.
y
I
estamos tan
trust her very
involucradas las
much,
dos en la comunidad
and we're
que
both very
creo
much
que
plugged into the
las
community.
dos
And I think both
tomaríamos
of us, we
la
would take
decisión que
the
beneficie más a
decision
la comunidad cuando no
we'll make
esté
the right
una, que
decision for the
pueda
benefit of our
la
community.
otra tener esa
So
misma
if one of them is in,
responsabilidad y
one
tomar
can go
ese
out
rol de
and take
si es
that
que
role
hay votaciones.
if there are, for example, votes.
No sé si iba en esa parte.
So I do not know if you heard everything that I said.
Gracias. Can I make a suggestion, please?
Entonces,
Because
¿puedo
I
hacer
do
una
not-
sugerencia?
I do not want to miss out anybody's words.
Yo no quiero no escuchar las palabras de cualquier persona.
No estoy escuchando, no sé si alguien está hablando.
Can we break down the translation into steps? So the person
¿Podemos
speaking,
traducir esto?
the person speaking says,
La persona dijo,
Araceli, quizás lo que está pasando es que si puedes
what is
hablar en
happening
segmentos
is you
para
can
que
speak in
podamos,
shorter segments so that we can
podemos
that way-
hacer la traducción.
so that we can do the translation, interpretation,
and then that way we can hear what everybody is saying.
so then we can hear, para que podamos escuchar lo que está diciendo todo el mundo.
Gracias.
Thank you.
All right, next we have Mimi Hernandez from Prosperity Lab.
Siguiente, Mimi Hernandez.
Vincent, if you can please accept the interpretation, that we can go back into the channel.
Are we ready?
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for allowing us to participate in this. It's always wonderful after the year we had to be able to not sit by the sidelines and be able to be a little bit more proactive about how to recover for the small business community that we serve. The only thing I would point out, I read the letter that was sent by the unions, and I'm in agreement with a lot of the points they brought out. I don't know if we're going to have discussion on that, but I did want to say for me, I would like to know that anything that we do, any goals that we set, I want to make sure that it's something that is measurable. I like to know that the work that I do is impactful, and if there's going to be any improvement in future projects. I hope that this committee has the foresight to review those things, to set some goals, to review afterwards and see if we're effective, and then to take some key learnings from this in good collaborative spirit.
Great, thank you, Mimi.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to make a comment? That would be the last hand raised. All right, I think we're going to our next segment.
I see Dolores's hand.
I'm sorry, Dolores.
Hi, good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for including Community Health Partnership in this important discussion. Just wanted to make a couple comments and then a quick question. The comment is around health, and I noticed that in one section it said health and wellness for employees, and then it said health in general. So are we to address both? This, I guess, is the question, which makes sense.
Yes, I think that's something that the task force members should consider and decide if you want to do both. I think that there's interest, obviously, in both.
Okay, good. And we'll probably have a breakout for that. Is that what you're thinking at this point, or?
So what we're proposing at this point, because we know that task force members are going to be interested in various topics, we think that it's going to be more manageable if committees or solution groups are formed. It's kind of difficult to do it, with 55 people on a Zoom call.
Right.
But we're thinking if we can break out into smaller groups, and that way too, it's an opportunity to invite others who may not be task force members, but should be included in that topic area to bring them into the conversation. So that's what we're suggesting. And obviously, if that's something that the task force thinks it's a good idea, we're here to assist in moving that further.
Thank you. I think it's a good idea. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Dolores.
All right, Walter Wilson from the Minority Business Consortium.
Good evening, everyone. I just want to say a couple of things. Rosalind, thank you for this opportunity. I appreciate your leadership on this and the importance of bringing this all together in a spirit of openness and trust, and particularly when you speak about this effort being led by the community, because there are so many community leaders here, and the REAL is an organization of community leaders and community, and their principles that they started off with, I think is a great segue to moving into bigger and better things. I want to say this too, though, that I know many of the people here, and I don't see a lot of hands going up. I think people are waiting to kind of see what happens. I think that the city has had some opportunities to really do some great things with people here, and it's failed in the past. My heart is open, and I'm starting this process as an open book, and I'm hoping that we make great headway in this, because this is a very serious matter that's impacting our community and the people in the city, and many of the people here represent many of those constituents. And so this is a very a very serious effort. I believe that working together we can make a huge difference. I think one of the things that's interesting, it sounds like all the funds have been spent or allocated. And so kind of where I'm coming from is that I heard you mention if people have new ideas or new initiatives or others, how will those things be funded if the funds are already allocated? And it sounds like all of that money's been allocated. There's no money for us to work with individually to say, hey, here's $100 million for us to do things with. I didn't hear that, and I don't think that is in fact the case. And I'm not sure that even as the money was allocated in the pie chart, that those allocated dollars are even available for us to allocate according to how we see things. And so I'd like to get a clarification on that. The other thing I want to say is that I'm glad you're focusing on small business, because Minority Business Consortium, our whole goal is to empower our communities and bring resources into our community and make our businesses successful, because if our businesses and our communities are successful, our communities will be successful as well. And I wanted to say that in spite of the American Recovery Act, there are billions of dollars that are being spent in this community here with the VTA BART, high-speed rail. The county of Santa Clara is one of the largest developers in the county, quite frankly, with billions of dollars in construction and other types of procurement. And so San Jose Evergreen College District, they're reaching out in the communities of color and doing great work as well, and bringing these small minority and women-owned businesses into the process. So beyond what the city has to offer, I think that there's billions of other dollars that we need to consider in these processes and bring those partners into the table so we can make sure that that they are also an important part of this recovery. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you so much, Walter. I do want to take just a moment to address the comment about the ARP funding and what's been allocated. And actually, it has not been all allocated. And in fact, this past Tuesday, City Council They were supposed to have a discussion on that. So there's about $83 million that is currently unallocated. And so there's funding available for new initiatives or new projects outside of the 18 that have already been identified and funding has been allocated to those. So there is existing funding unallocated that the city council can allocate. And so we are looking, the administration, our budget director will be going back to them at the end of this month or the beginning of next month for a further conversation and get further direction.
So I'm sorry, I want to speak to that then. So, but city council is taking a look at that 80-something million, I believe is what you just said. So when they finish doing whatever it is they're doing, that money may or may not be available. Is that correct?
So they will decide how it gets allocated. It's currently unallocated ARP funding. Yeah, that needs to get allocated, right? That needs to get allocated to services.
Well, I hope we have an opportunity to weigh in on that. I really do. Thank you so much.
Certainly.
Next we have Raimundo.
I'm unmuting myself. Yeah. Good evening. Thank you for organizing this and having us all participate in this endeavor. I think for me, what the pandemic demonstrated is the ability for different organizations to come together to meet the needs of the individual. And I would like to see, as a result of this process, how we can continue that way of operating so that we eliminate barriers for people that need help, whether that be for healthcare, whether that be for housing, whether that be for food, whether that be for transportation. How do we work together to connect people to the services that they may need in order to help them achieve hopefully some prosperity, but a better life in this valley?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Dolores Alvarado from Community Health Partnership.
Thank you again. I forgot to ask my second question. Does the money need to be spent during fiscal year 22? Or 23, I should say, I guess, at this point.
So I guess the short answer would be no. There is opportunity to use the funding in subsequent fiscal years.
Okay, thank you very much.
Next, we have Victoria Ramirez from the Health Trust.
Thanks, Roslyn. I just wanted to follow up a little bit on Dolores's and Walter's comment about the funding and more so any timeline for the task force in terms of is there any requirements as to when we need to provide recommendations for funding expenses or funding allocations, considering that the council can go next month and make allocations from that pot. So just wondering if there's any timeline for us to work.
Yeah, thank you so much, Victoria. Great question. And actually, we're going to get to that very topic later in the agenda. But just to let everyone know, so part of council direction in creating this task force was that the duration of the task force would be a year, 12 months. So with that, we are thinking that your work will wrap up this time next year. And so if there are recommendations that you would like City Council to consider, we would work with you in developing those. And my thinking is it would be that we would produce a document, right, a report that would get transmitted to City Council for their consideration.
Do you have any other questions?
Okay, so I think with that, we're going to move into the next segment of the agenda.
Hi, Rosalind. I did get a request to ask Araceli to repeat her comment. If we can do that again at this time. Araceli, if you can please repeat your comment, what I will do is I'm going to move the interpreter back to the main channel. I ask that you select the English channel. That way you can hear the interpreter repeating your comment in English. And then Vincent, I'm going to move you to the main channel. If you can please allow Araceli to state her comment first, and then if you can repeat that in English after she's done speaking. I'm going to go ahead and do that now. So Araceli, if you can please again move to the English channel so we can begin this. Thank you.
Jennifer?
Yes, Vincent, you're now on the main channel. Araceli, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself to repeat your comment.
You unmuted the wrong Araceli.
Ya lo repito.
Okay,
Sí,
so am I
por
ready
favor.
to repeat it?
Yes. Sí, por favor.
Yes, go ahead.
Ok.
Okay, so
Lo que había comentado
what I
es
said before
en la parte de roles, de nuestros
was in
roles.
regards to the
No
roles that we're going to
escuché
play.
bien
I
cuál
didn't
es el
hear
rol de
what is going
nuestros
to be the
suplentes,
role
Vincent,
nuestra
of our
persona
subs.
suplente,
Vincent,
para
if you could please allow
algún día
Araceli to
que
speak.
no podamos asistir nosotros. Y mi sugerencia es que fuera prácticamente el mismo de nosotros, que ellos tengan también ese poder de tomar decisiones o de traer lo que nosotros a lo mejor no vamos a poder porque no vamos a asistir, y que tengan ese derecho de, si es que hay alguna votación, que puedan ellos votar en nuestro nombre. Creo que es más eficaz y avanzaríamos un poco más. Pues este trabajo no lo quiero considerar trabajo, pero este rol que nos está tocando, que es para ayudar a todas nuestras comunidades, y creo que entre más eficaces seamos con nuestro tiempo y también de todos, vamos a poder ayudar un poco más pronto. La ayuda va a venir más pronto, y creo que en mí, la persona que es mi suplente está más que capacitada para tener la palabra cuando yo no esté y tener ese mismo derecho y misma voz de votar, ya que estamos igual de involucradas en nuestra comunidad y también nos interesa hacer algo que sea equitativo para todos. Y entre más pronto podamos brindar esa ayuda, pues mejor. Gracias.
Vincent, repeat that in English.
Yeah, that was a mouthful. So my comment was in regards to the role of the substitutes for our roles. I think that they should have the same power, the same decision-making authority, and also the possibility to assist and represent when we are not available to assist ourselves. They should be able to vote in our name when the time comes if we are not available as the primary representative. I believe that this method would make it very efficient for us to be able to move forward and make good progress with this job that we have in front of us, that we can all play a good role to help our community and work very efficiently to help everybody in the community. In my case, my sub is more than ready to take over my position because she works with me. She's very committed to the community, and she knows the community very well. And so we want to make sure that we all work in a very equitative and efficient way, and we can all get better much sooner.
So Vincent, if you could share with Araceli that yes, her alternate representative can participate on the task force when she's not available, and that person will be able to vote on any matters So if you could just confirm that with her.
Entonces, señora Araceli, ¿sí me escucha bien? Señora Araceli, ¿me puede escuchar? ¿Sí me escucha?
No, no estoy escuchando nada.
Vincent, I'll go ahead and move you to the Spanish channel. Looks like she's still in there and didn't move to the English. So I'll go ahead and
Okay.
move you there right now. 1 second.
Thank you.
Okay, so.
Sí, ahora sí.
Thank you. All right, so I think now we're going to transition to the next segment on the agenda, which is our breakout exercise. And Carlos, am I passing this on to you to share instructions?
Yes.
Great.
Thank you, Rosalind, and to all of you for your questions. We're now going to go into the next part of our agenda, which is an opportunity for you all to meet and introduce yourself to your fellow task force members. To begin hearing from you about what recovery work you're most interested in and how we should work together to ensure that the entire community is involved in this process. So for the next 25 minutes, we'll be breaking you into groups to answer, next slide, please, to answer these 3 prompts. First, introduce yourselves, your name, organization, and how about sharing one hobby that you like to do outside of work? The second question, second prompt, of the city's recovery initiatives that were shared earlier by Rosalind, which one are you most interested in working on and why? And third, how should the recovery task force, how should we engage our community in this work or share information about the existing initiatives? We will have 1 to 2 of my colleagues here at the city in each of these rooms to take notes and to facilitate your discussion. After the 25 minutes, we'll have about 10 minutes for 1 member in your group to share 1 key takeaway from what you shared. Are you all interested in the same initiative? Is there a resounding yes on what we should be doing to connect with the community? We want to hear 1 key takeaway. I recommend selecting 1 person before you all speak, so this person can be prepared and to share when you share with you before they share to all of us. Also, it might be good to take a picture of this slide with your phone so you have the questions with you. Our team will also initiatives and this slide in case you want to see it again. With only 25 minutes of this exercise and about 7 task force members in each group, we ask that you make space for others and give others the time to respond as well. Let's make sure that 1 person speaks at a time. And if you don't feel comfortable to share at this time, you definitely have the right to pass. To the members of the public, you will be placed in one of the groups, but we do ask that you continue to be patient and allow only the task force members to participate. As we mentioned earlier, you will have the opportunity for 2 minutes time during the public comment section of the meeting. Sounds good? Okay, 1 more time. We want to make sure that those who need Spanish or Vietnamese interpretation will be placed in a room with the proper interpreter. So I believe Araceli Sierra will be the one you will want some Spanish interpretation. Is there anyone else in the room that wants Spanish interpretation? If so, please raise your hand now so we can place you in the proper room. Okay, so now for those that wish for Vietnamese interpretation, can you please raise your hand now by pressing the raise your hand button. Okay, I think we have everyone. So I think that's it. We'll see you there. I think there will be a timer. So we'll see you in 25 minutes.
Hello, everyone. So Zoom is just not fair, right? It's, you know, once you get into a really great conversation, it just kicks you out. that I think that we have. I see most of us back in the main room. So Carlos, I'm gonna actually call on you to facilitate the breakout reports.
Excellent. So I believe everyone should have elected someone to report out. I think there's about 9 groups. So if everyone who was elected to be one of the breakout rooms could raise their hand, and so we can go ahead and call on you. And I guess I'll probably just begin with, oh, I see Raimundo. So go ahead and, Raimundo.
Yeah, this is Raimundo. So our group, let's see. So, wow, I'm gonna skip all the stuff we talked about, what we like to do in our, I guess, in after work or whatever. But I think the group was looking into working essential workers and economic recovery, the housing stabilization, reemployment of the workforce, and development of policy initiatives to help workers. Also, health and wellness came out. Housing was economic recovery through housing and rent relief, and increasing the feeling was that the need is increasing and there's a need for more assistance. PPE came up as well as a focus to continue. Housing and again, small business recovery. Health was also an issue in the promotoras. I think were a focus that was also presented. When we talked about how do we share information, I think we talked about social media, parent engagement at the schools and distribution sites, reaching out with temporary employees, social media platforms like Instagram, TikTok, text, InReach, meaning organizations can talk to their own clients to get information or provide information to determine the needs. One of the issues that came up is are we targeting to determine, is our role to target to determine the needs, or is our role to inform people of what we're doing or what's available, I guess. There's also, I expressed the concern about waiting for information before we start versus continuing with the progress that was made during the pandemic and continue to push that and making adjustment as we go along by having focus group to guide us. But I think one of the concerns is, what is it? Analysis by paralysis. Hopefully not having that happen in this process. I don't know, anybody else want to comment?
Well, thank you, Raimundo. I think we really only have time for one member of each group to report out, and we are asking folks to just share one takeaway. We will have an opportunity to share the minutes, the notes from each of the breakout rooms, so you will have an opportunity to hear what everyone shared. So let's just try to go through this and ask folks to just share one key takeaway. Claudia, I see that you're next to you.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So one of the takeaways in my group was using the network of the organizations have as a way to take the temperature of the community and bring the information back to the task force. Yeah.
Thank you, gracias. Brendan, I see you next here.
Okay, so for our group, I guess, first of all, I'd mention that we had singers and swimmers and musicians and basketball players and gardeners all in our group. People staying very active in their community. Some of the things that were brought up in terms of working on initiatives, there still seemed to be very much concern on some very immediate recovery issues, both in housing and food distribution. So one of the thoughts was really about how housing is still a very immediate issue regarding rent relief, but also that it's such a systemic, ongoing, concern in our community that seemed to be an important area for both addressing immediate issues and long-term problems for our community. There was also discussion around supporting small business and a desire to focus on supporting workers with retraining and worker placement into with good jobs, well-paying, sustainable jobs that folks can go back to, and how do we put strategies into motion to support that. On the communication side, one kind of topic that was brought up was around a desire to really have clear understanding and a clear charge for our roles as task force members when we're speaking to the broader community about what exactly it is that this task force will be able to impact in terms of city policies and prioritization of resources. To get good community input, we feel we need to be able to clearly describe how we're going to try to bring that back and impact specific issues. So those are comments from our group.
Gracias, Brendan. Mimi Hernandez, I see you next.
Hi, we had a pretty good group. So some of the common themes were around the concerns for local artists and business recovery, of course, food being and reemployment being just vital, and the building back better. But overall, what I saw was the observation is there's a lot of enthusiasm about the work and being part of this group. There's a lot of concern about making sure that we have an approach and hear the voices of the communities that we all represent and that we serve, to ensure that there is cross-collaboration and that we build synergy in the programs that are developed or initiatives that come out of this task force.
Gracias, Mimi. Ben, I see you next.
Yes, thank you. We had a really good group. Some common themes that were coming up were centering around family, childcare, workforce development, and then recovery for small business, arts groups, and nonprofits. I think there was one key takeaway to share that we touched on. I think it was just keeping in mind to look at the places where synergy could exist between these separate initiatives. So if we're talking about workforce development, how does that flow into small business and local arts recovery? And then just in terms of engagement with the community, lots of things around making sure as soon as we're able to get off Zoom, to get out into the communities and listening to what the communities have to say, and then really making sure we're maximizing flexibility to maximize engagement, whether that's through timing of meetings or also just utilizing social media and other communication platforms. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Derek, I see you next.
Yes, thank you. I'll be brief. We talked about the overall theme was meeting people where they are and having more outreach. And that includes organizing low-wage workers, emergency housing, supporting small businesses, and the digital divide, closing that, making sure there's equity with that. And while we do have digital access, we still need to have in-person meetings because not everybody has that digital piece.
Yes, great point. Thank you, Derek. Mary, I see you next.
So our group talked about many of the things that have already been mentioned, but I want to focus our takeaway on the reemployment and workforce section. We talked about the need to really imagine more deeply what that area could be. We think that it's more than about reemployment, thinking about employment, filling vacancies, recruitment and retention, and just thinking more broadly about policies around employment and workforce in a more holistic and comprehensive way.
Thank you, Mary. Annie, I see you next.
Hi, so for our group, I think the theme is around self-help and self-sufficiency, especially as a way to kind of stay resilient, to be resilient through this time think some of us talk about really not relying on the system, but kind of training, kind of creating our own job opportunities to meet our own needs. So for example, training residents who are interested in becoming childcare workers or childcare providers, having their own business, whether that means becoming licensed childcare providers or doing it in some other way, and getting funding sources to help support that effort. We also talk about how businesses are being really impacted, small businesses are really being impacted during this time, and how we can kind of band together to help them. Yeah, I think those are some of the main things that came out.
Thank you so much, Annie. And I believe the last group is number 9, Mr. Walter Wilson.
Yeah. So I think our common theme was, we talked about a lot of things and we had a wonderful group of folks there. But I think our common theme was, well, primarily focused on the outreach and how we reach out to these various communities of color and then cultures and their different backgrounds and ethnicities and what that process is going to look like. And more importantly, if we do it, are there going to be resources available to do so? In order to do so properly, it will definitely require resources. And then we talked about, some of the things that's happened in the past, like for example, when we first in the county here started doing contact tracing, they had just people going out to communities, and I think the community learned a lot about that in terms of making sure you have the right people talking to the right folks and trusted people from their communities in order to get the message across in a way that's authentic and in a way that people will be trusting of it. And then we thought that was key. The other thing, as I said too, is the resources available to do that. One of the other conversations that I thought was important was the focus on resources and whether or not we're going to have an opportunity to really weigh in before the city council begins to make their decision on this last 84 million. And that's a really, really important part of this whole process, making sure that at some point like now, that we'll be able to say, okay, these are things that we think are our priorities. But I think also too, and I know that this is the case with the African-American community, that we've been in contact and been in talks with the city about our priorities. And I think many other people have been doing the same thing I don't know how many people in this group have, but I know other communities of color have had an opportunity to weigh in. And so did a lot of people from the Rio. They actually put a concerted effort forward to help address what the needs are in the various communities and get this information in front of the city council. So hopefully that's part of that process. And then if we have a chance to weigh in that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Walter. Thank you everyone so much. And thanks to my group for allowing the interpreter to make it accessible for everyone. So gracias. Rosalind, I'll toss it back to you.
Oh, Carlos. So up next we have presentation on the Brown Act, as well as the Public Records Act. And I know this is exciting. These are exciting topics for you all. It's required. So we have a representative from the City Attorney's Office, and I'm sure Diana is on the call. I don't see her. Carlos, can you help me?
Yep, I'm here, Rosalind.
There you are. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. So as Rosalind said, I am with the City Attorney's Office. So I'm here to give you guys a quick rundown on some of the laws that surround and govern this task force. So I'll just do a quick overview. I know that Carlos sent out a link to everybody already that contains a video, some PowerPoint slides, and a quiz that will go over all of this information in more detail. So the Brown Act is state law. It applies to any legislative body, decision-making body, or advisory body, and this is an advisory body to the City Council. And the general rule is that all of your meetings have to be open in public, and members have to discuss and act on the public's business openly, and the public has the right to participate in those discussions and those actions. There are a few exceptions. They're very narrowly construed. Next slide, please. So this task force is an advisory body, as I mentioned. It is not what we would consider a decision-making body because you all will make recommendations to the city council and then the city council will take action. So the Brown Act applies, the Sunshine Resolution applies, and the Public Records Act apply to you in this task force. Next slide, please. So what is a meeting under the Brown Act? It's any congregation of a majority of the members of the body. So that would be a majority of the members of this task force at the same time and location to hear, discuss, deliberate, or take action on something that is within the task force subject matter jurisdiction. It's important to note that no action has to be taken in order for it to be considered a meeting. Next slide, please. So what is not considered a meeting? So a majority of the members can attend social or ceremonial occasions, conferences, community forums, and meetings of other government bodies, as long as you do not discuss business that would come before the task force. So remember that the Brown Act requires that any meeting of the majority of the members be notarized to the public, and the public has the right to participate and listen to those meetings. Next slide, please. So under the Brown Act, these are some examples of prohibited meetings. So a majority of members cannot use telephone, fax, email, text messages, human intermediaries, or other means to discuss, deliberate, or develop a consensus, agreement, or decision on any item of business that is within the task force's subject matter jurisdiction. Those discussions should occur at an agendized public meeting. So prohibited meetings include serial meetings. This is a series of meetings to discuss, deliberate, or take action, each of which may involve less than a majority, but which taken together involve a majority of the members. So for example, if you have a 5-member board, 3 constitutes a majority. So a daisy chain in which person A talks to B, and then B texts person C her own position and A's position. This would cause a Brown Act violation because even though each communication involves less than a majority of members, overall it involves contact among a majority of members. Another example is the hub and spoke. If person A asks B and D individually and separately how they are going to vote, this constitutes a Brown Act violation because person A now knows how B and D are going to vote along with her own vote. She now knows how a majority is going to vote before the votes have been cast, and that's why it's a Brown Act violation. And emails. Do not reply to all. It is very easy to accidentally trigger a Brown Act violation when you reply to all. Next slide, please. So staff briefings are allowed. Staff are the people that you met today that work for the city. Staff can talk to task force members. Staff cannot communicate to other members what another member has said. Next slide, please. And now the Public Records Act. This is a California law that applies to all members of this task force because you are now considered city officials. So the city has also adopted a Sunshine Transparency Resolution that has stricter requirements than the state law. So under the Public Records Act, members of the public can request any writing, recording, or other record containing information relating to city business. And city officials must search their city email, the city network, personal emails, notes, and texts, and their personal devices to find responsive material. Please note that personal emails and texts are public records if they relate to city business. So we strongly recommend that you only use your city email to conduct city business. And so again, as I said before, Carlos sent out a link with a video and PowerPoint slides that goes over all of this information in much more detail. It'll also go over information that only applies to decision-making bodies. Keep in mind that you guys are an advisory body. It's still good to have an idea of those other regulations and to understand why they may or may not apply to you. And I think, Carlos, I believe we would like the members to complete the quiz by November 19th.
Yes, and just to be clear, that email was sent out by Rose. So
oh, Rosalind, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
All right, and that's the end of my presentation.
I think Diana Walter has a question. Would you like to ask that?
Hi, Diana. Thanks so much for that important information. Two questions. How many people are in this task force officially? And actually 3 questions. And then the second question is, can that number change? And then the third question is, didn't the governor do some sort of Zoom era modifications to Brown or something?
Yes. So my understanding is there are 55 members in this task force. So 28 would constitute your majority. Your second question, I apologize, I've already forgotten it.
Will the task force numbers change, or can they change? And so that's probably a question for Rosalind, I imagine.
Yeah, so the city council took action on these 55 member organizations. So if the membership changes, it would take council action. So right now it's the 55 members. We don't anticipate that changing.
Thank you so much. And then the last one is about the governor's modification of Brown.
That's correct. So that relates to teleconferencing and when it is allowed and when it is not allowed. So the governor did make changes to that, which is why we're all able to meet via teleconference now. That did not affect these Brown Act or Public Records Act rules that I just went over.
Okay, thank you very much.
Christine, would you like to ask a question?
Yes, 2 things really quickly. One, I'm grateful for Executive Order number 29, and I know that that is to be continued even after the pandemic, et cetera, et cetera. I'm also wondering if we're an advisory body, we are beholden to the city. I have my office email. Will we be given or allowed, or how do we handle task force emails?
So any communication relating to the task force will still be considered a public record. I'm not sure if that was your question or if your question was specifically relating to city emails or where those emails are stored.
I'm more wondering, it's one thing to know that the city emails are on some kind of server safe and sound, but I'm more concerned since we're a variety of bodies, mostly nonprofits. Our agencies emails are, held private, of course, but still, given what we're doing, are we going to be, I guess the best way to ask it is, are we going to be issued a separate email?
Rosalind, do you know if they have been given city email addresses?
No, they will not be issued a separate city email address.
Okay.
So city staff will be contacting them using the email address that they provided to us.
Okay, so then for all the task force members, just keep in mind that any communications relating to the task force, you may be asked to produce if we get a public records request.
If I can interject, you had mentioned that we shouldn't use our personal emails as per Brown Act in case there's a question about the business, that all business shouldn't be conducted on our personal emails. Now you're saying we should conduct our business on our personal emails?
Right, so I thought that you were going to be issued a city email address. I was wrong, so you won't be issued a city email address. So whatever email address that you are using to conduct task force business, just keep in mind that if we receive a public records request for those emails, you might be asked to send them to us.
Just those emails related
right,
to
emails
the task
that
force.
Yes, just the emails related to the task force. We'll ask you to search your own emails records, and if there's anything that relates to the task force, we'll ask you to send us that email.
All right, thank you.
Any more questions? All right. Thank you so much, Diana, for this very important information. So I think we're going to move on to the next section, final couple sections of this meeting, how will we work together? So for that, I'm going to introduce my colleague, Aurelia Bailey.
All right, so the meeting procedures. Meeting agendas will be published in advance of each meeting. So in this case, 7 days. All meetings are open to the public. Public comments will be taken at the end of every meeting in collaboration with the task force. Meetings will be organized and facilitated by city staff and consultant team. Task force members are responsible for communicating their ideas and positions on topics at each meeting, and then summary notes from each meeting will be provided prior to the next meeting. And then group agreements, I'll hand that back to Carlos.
So we also wanted to spend some time to share and receive some input from you on group agreements, or how we're going to work together during these meetings to ensure people feel included, heard, and valued. So here are just some of the agreements that we're proposing. Listen to understand, not to respond. Instead of thinking about what you want to say while the other person is talking, just really listen to them. I know my wife will say I will need to work on this a little bit too, so let's practice this when we meet. Respect diverse individuals and opinions. There's 55 of us in this task force, and I love that you're all different people with so many lived experiences and skills. So respecting others' opinions doesn't have to mean being untrue to our own, only that we recognize that others are entitled to look at the world differently, and that when they share their views with us, they'll get a fair hearing and vice versa. Let's share the floor. Let's make space for others to speak during these meetings. Again, there's 55 of us, and if we want to follow through with the goal of doing this collectively, we must manage our time and ensure that all of us have a chance to participate. Again, one person speaks at a time, and during these meetings, you can continue to use the hand raise feature and wait for when you're asked to speak to be able to unmute yourself and speak. Turn your cell phone off if you have the opportunity, or put them away if possible during the meetings. If you must have it with you or do need to take a call, we just want to make sure that you are muted. So overall, it's a civil discourse. Let's practice patience, integrity, humility, and mutual respect in our conversations, even or especially with those with whom we may disagree with. So these are just some starting points, and we want to allot some time right now to welcome your thoughts, additions, and revisions to these. Are there others that we feel we should incorporate? It's important to us that we work together right now to create and formally agree on these. What we're going to be doing is just taking your input and sharing these at the next meeting with plans for us to vote and agree on a set of group agreements. So I see, Christine, you have your hand up.
I'd like to make a couple of quick suggestions. Number one, that we get into the habit of saying our names before we speak, so that those who are visually impaired or blind can pick up on who is saying what, and those on the phone or not able to see the screen have the same opportunity. But it also makes it easier to transcribe, because then you can track who is saying what. Another thing to remember is to keep your comments at a reasonable pace, because the open captioning at the bottom is doing a fairly good job at keeping up, but that can't always be guaranteed. I'd also like to suggest that we consider getting an ASL interpreter in for these meetings, especially if the deaf community come in. Not everybody understands ASL, and not everybody can read English. So we need to recognize that.
Thank you, Christine. Kiana, I see you have your hand up as well.
Yes, hi, Kiana with Bill Wilson here. I just wanted to offer one agreement. no one knows everything. Together we know a lot. That's it.
Thank you so much, Kiana. Other comments, other additions? Jose, I see you here. Go ahead. You can go ahead and unmute yourself, Jose.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Hi, my name is Jose Rios. Anyway, just got a question. How often are we going to be doing these meetings so that way at least I can put them on my agenda? I think they're excellent. I love them. I think it's great.
Great question. We'll get to that in just a second. That's the next thing we'll be talking about.
Good.
Dolores, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you very much, Carlos. One other bullet that I'd like to offer for your consideration is an opportunity to be able to ask for clarification if someone is talking about a topic that I know nothing about. You know, I would like to be able to do that, and I'm sure others would need to do that as well. I'm not sure how to phrase it, but you'll know how to phrase it if that's agreeable to you. Thank you.
Great point. Thank you so much, Dolores. All right, any other comments or additions, suggestions? Okay, well then I think we'll get into the next slide, which is exactly what Jose was just mentioning. So we wanted to quickly discuss our meeting schedule. We've gotten feedback that the first Thursday of the month conflicts with a lot of folks, and that people have also asked for a set schedule, as Jose just asked, to our monthly meetings, so you can all properly plan around it. So in light of the feedback we've been hearing, we're proposing that we move meetings to the second Thursday of the month at 6 p.m. as a fixed date and time for these meetings. This would put our next meeting for Thursday, December 9th, which may also be good also to avoid the busy holiday season schedule that I know all of us will get into later on that month. So that second Thursday would be the schedule for the rest of the 12-month duration of our task force. Of course, Thursdays doesn't have to be the day. So I wanted to just put that out there to see if we can just gauge if this works for you. Does another day of the week work for you? If you have any thoughts about this, just please raise your hand so we can call on you. Otherwise, if there is no large disagreements on this, we will set this schedule of the second Thursdays moving forward. Christine, I see you have your hand.
Second Thursdays are going to be squishy for me because I do have a second meeting. Other than that, most other days are available.
Thank you for that, Christine. Any other comments about this date? I think we would go ahead, Araceli. So first, let me give a second for one of the interpreters to move into the English room, so then we could have them translate Araceli's response.
I just moved Vincent to the main channel. Vincent, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, perfect. Okay. So what we'll do is same as before, we'll have Araceli say her comment, and then you can repeat that in English after she's done.
Of course.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Araceli. ¿Puedes seguir, Araceli?
Ok, yo iba a decir, a mí me queda perfecto los jueves, pero también entiendo que a lo mejor no es para todos. Si no fuera los jueves, si pudiera ser el martes, el horario está perfecto, ya sea martes o jueves. Y quería preguntar de cuántas horas sería, 2 horas o 2:30.
So in my case, the best day for me is Thursday. I understand that Thursday may not be the best day for everybody, but I believe Tuesday is also another good possibility for me. And the question I have is, what is the length of these meetings going to be, 2 or 2.5 hours?
Thank you, Araceli. So I'm hearing right now that the consensus is that Thursdays works for folks. We have heard Araceli mention that Tuesdays and Thursdays work. I think maybe Christine, we can have a conversation about how we can maybe work with you on these. Rosalind, don't know if you maybe have something you want to chime in as well.
No, just my only comment, someone asked about the length of the meetings, and we apologize because we have gone over tonight, but we intend to keep these meetings monthly for 2 hours max, so 6 to 8, if you could set aside time in your calendars for that. I know we appreciate how difficult it is, right? It's, to come up with a date that works for most, but we're hoping to get consensus. It sounds like second Thursdays of the month works for most. If we could get a thumbs up or raised hand if there's some big objection. I'm seeing some thumbs, I'm seeing some smiles. Thank you so much for smiling. That's so helpful. I'm seeing thumbs.
To be clear, you want thumbs for assent and raised hands for dissent. Is that correct?
Oh, no. So maybe I just do it this way. If you could use your raised hand feature, that will constitute yes, second Thursday of the month, 6 p.m.
Looks like the consensus is their second Thursday.
Yes. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone. I think we can move on to the next section then, which I believe that was it. So the next slide, Aurelia. The public comment section. So this is the moment where we're at the end of the meeting where we're going to be allowing folks to make public comment. So if you are a member of the public and you do wish to make a comment, then just simply raise your hand and we'll call on you. My colleague Mike will call on you. But first, I did want to. Is there Araceli? I see Araceli and Frederick with their hands up. Do any of you want to make a comment in Spanish or in Vietnamese? So then we can bring the Spanish interpreter into the room. So right now, I guess maybe let's go ahead and put your hand down. And for those who want to speak in Spanish, make a comment in Spanish, you can raise your hand. Dolores, did you want to make a comment in Spanish? I think you're still muted, Dolores. I'm sorry. So
es mejor preguntarles en español si quieren hacer comentario.
So I think we just want to make sure we give folks this chance to speak it in their preferred language. I think if you want to make your comment in English,
No,
Dolores.
I don't have a comment. Thank you, Carlos.
Okay. Any other members of the community who want to make a comment in Vietnamese? Okay, so then we'll go into the rest of the folks who want to make a public comment. So feel free to raise your hand again if you want to make a public comment. You'll have 2 minutes to make your comment. All right, Sarah, I see you here. Go ahead.
Hi, I just wanted to comment quickly on our procedure around alternates. I think it would be a missed opportunity to not have alternates participating in our meetings, even if they're not voting members. My alternate is a person who has lived experience as a hospitality worker. She works for Team San Jose. And I think it would be a good opportunity to include someone with lived experience throughout the process. And then I also know there's a lot of folks who we have multifaceted organizations, and there might be people with lived experience that aren't our alternates who we want to include in particular meetings. So I just want to see if it's possible to be open to having those folks participate, not just during public comment, but be able to participate in the meeting more fully. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Are there any other members of the public who wish to make a comment? If so, raise your hand. Okay. So thank you. I think we'll get into just the last section of this, which is the next steps. Can you open up the slide again, Aurelia? So thank you all for sticking with us tonight. I did want to talk about just the next step. Looks like the next meeting will be scheduled for Thursday, December 9th at 6 p.m. So we will be working to communicate that with you in the coming days or coming weeks. So just take note, this Thursday, December 9th is going to be our next meeting, and it looks like we'll be setting the schedule of second Thursdays of each month, 6 p.m. for our meetings. Next steps, again, I know Rosalind in her prior communication to task force members did send a link to the Brown Act video. There is also a link to a quiz. It's an important part of our work, and just we're hoping that you have the time to view the video. I think it's about 28, 30 minutes long, and then also be able to send that to your alternate representative so they also are aware of this process. And speaking of alternate representatives, I know that some of you folks some of the representatives were still working to provide us with an alternate. So we will be following up with you about giving us your information about who your alternate representative will be. And so we ask folks to provide us with their alternate representative and to shoot to take to complete the Brown Act video and quiz by November 19th. We do have a website set up, sanjoseca.gov/COVID-19 recovery. That's where all of our information, our agendas, presentations, and any other public letters that we've been receiving, information of resources that will help you learn about the task force and about our work and meetings are all going to be housed there. So I urge you folks to favorite sanjoseca.gov/COVID-19 recovery. And we also do have a general email. This email, CER taskforce@sanjoseca.gov. That's going to be the best opportunity for folks to communicate with us. And our staff, which includes myself, Aurelia, Katarina, and Rosalind, will be the ones monitoring this email address. Final questions. It looks like I see Christine with her hand up. Go ahead, Christine.
Not a question, more of a comment. It turns out that I will be able to make the 6 o'clock start. It just means that I have to leave my other meeting a half hour earlier than expected, I guess is the way to put it.
Thank you so much, Christine. I really appreciate that. That makes me happy. All right. I guess Sam, go ahead.
Yeah, quick question. Would all the meeting be taken, be conducted over the Zoom, or are we going to be doing in-person meeting?
That's a great question. We so hope that before in the upcoming months that we'll be able to meet in person. That's our hope, that's our goal, but we'll see how things change with the health orders. And obviously, as we get into engaging our residents, we really do want to have opportunities to do things in person. So stay tuned. We've got some months ahead of us, but do know that that is our goal, that we'll be able to gather in person. That's a great question. And also, just before we adjourn, just in terms of potential agenda items for our next meeting in December. So I'm taking notes that will bring back the ideas around the group agreement. So we hope to get consensus on that. We hope to have a discussion. You all have a discussion about the formation of committees. We heard a lot of interest in that this evening. And then we will likely propose that a couple of the leads of some of the recovery initiatives attend the meeting and perhaps provide a presentation on some of the ongoing work so that the task force members can get more familiar with that. So I think those are probably the agenda items for the December meeting. We'll obviously be communicating with you through email.
Thank you, Rosalind. I think,
Sure.
Coco.
No, I was going to say, any other final questions, comments? We appreciate you so much for spending so much time with us this evening. And we look forward. I love the heart. Thank you so much, Kiana. Lots of hearts. That's great. That's a great way to end the meeting. So again, thank you so much. We'll be in contact with you with more information. Of course, any questions, feel free to shoot us an email. Have a great meeting. Carlos, did I forget anything, or Aurelia?
I believe you got it all. Thank you so much, everyone. Really appreciate you all. And I look forward to working with you in the coming months.
Great.
All right.